The final part to 20 Years Story. Part 1 link is down below in the comments if you haven't watched that yet. Tears welled up in her eyes as she initially tried to shift blame. I know having an affair was wrong, but, and she yelled that I was inattentive for years and how she tried to make things worse. Blah blah blah. And you promised you'd stop snooping. My face made a wrinkled, incredulous look as I said in a sarcastic tone, "Do you really want to go there?" Her body slumped and walked to the back door as she muttered, "Yeah, you're right." I sat in the chair stewing for what seemed like 10 minutes. It was maybe 2, and went outside to get my own smoke. I wasn't going to let her take control of this conversation. She was sitting on the back porch steps that led to the patio. Her head was buried in her hands as one hand held her cigarette. The cigarette had a long cylinder of ash barely hanging on that indicated that she wasn't even paying attention to it. She was sobbing uncontrollably like I had just done 2 days prior. She heard me light up my own smoke and cried, "I don't want a divorce. I'll do anything." If anything was going to surprise me, it was these 3 words. I was expecting a fight, more denials, or more blaming. Not that I believed her when she said it at first, but this clearly wasn't my father talking. This was another person. My father never said such things and was difficult through the whole affair mess. I was confused and taken aback. "I honestly don't know if I can ever forgive you and continue in this marriage, but if you're serious and you really mean anything, then let's start with the truth." Over the course of probably 8 chain-smoked cigarettes, she told me of the affair, that it started when she went to his house and was surprised that no one else ended up coming over but her. The jerk planned it that way and had his buddies say they were coming over but not go. They were having fun and he leaned in to kiss her and she didn't stop him and they had you-know-what. I reminded her of the fact of how very good I am at finding things out, and if she is just saying that she had something minor to soften the blow when in fact she did more, then she'd better pony up now. She continued and said that they met at our house from that point on maybe 6 times over the course of the 17-day affair. She said he never brought protection, so they never did anything, although she admitted she would have. The fun time had always taken place on the living room couch and the bed was never used. That couch has since been donated to charity. The thing that struck me as odd was how she described the affair as just a fun time. It was almost as if it was a man talking. She even brought up the fact how I joked that the fact that she never had been intimate with anyone other than me, that she would have an affair sometime. She also said that her plan was to stop when his baby was born. Today I've gotten her to admit now that if it continued without me uncovering it, that her plan surely wouldn't have seen its end and she would have still continued to cheat and she would have developed more of an emotional attachment. After the truth finally came out, and more details eventually emerged later, but nothing was proven to be wrong from her initial statement. I said, "You're going to call other man right now. You're going to put him on speakerphone, you're going to tell him that he is never to talk to you again and that I will tell his wife if he doesn't." She did it without blinking. Hearing the fear in his voice was nice to say the least. He even asked if I was there, as I'm guessing he wanted to say something else if I wasn't. After the call, I told my wife that if she expects me to consider reconciliation, that she has to allow me to snoop to my heart's content and she can't say a word about it. I told her that her privacy is now null and void, and that she needed to always tell where she is going, what she is doing. She needed to get to sleep as she had a shift that night. She swallowed some pills and went off to bed. I sat there with a buzz in my brain wondering if I could do this. The thing that worried me the most was that OM worked at the same place and I had no way of verifying if they were to have any contact. I didn't know whether to demand that she quit prematurely, she would graduate in 3 months, and suffer financial problems, or just bite the bullet. Looking back and knowing what I know now, I really do have to pat myself on the back a bit here. Once I finally got the nerve to do what I needed to do, I did indeed do a lot of things right. I had no self-help books, I wasn't reading message boards at the time, yet in the span of 1 hour I managed to do the following intuitively. 1. Confront with the threat of divorce and not having it be an empty threat. While this wasn't intended, it was the crucial difference between me and my mom. My mother begged and pleaded and got shat on again and again. I was able to break her out of the fog by showing that her actions had very real consequences. 2. Got a no-contact agreement. While I didn't do a letter or anything like that, I made it very clear that they weren't to be friends or even talk to one another again, and if she did, then I would leave. More on this later regarding her work and the one attempt she made. 3. Got complete transparency. I also made sure she wasn't going to try to make me feel bad for verifying. 4. Had her answer any question I asked and had her answer them repeatedly. To me, this showed me that she had true remorse. It took a while, obviously, more later. But by doing this I was able to not rug sweep. Which isn't to say I didn't make mistakes either. To R or not to R, that is the question. D. Day 2 to 2 weeks. As vivid as my memories were of D-Day, my recollection of the 2 weeks that followed are a big blur. Aside from the huge stress ball of infidelity and deciding whether or not to attempt reconciliation, life just had to throw in some more problems to complicate things. My company was involved in a BS product liability suit and we were screwed from the get-go. The plaintiff was an all-American girl who was already blind in one eye and the injury caused damage to her other eye. The weird thing is that they didn't even have the defective product for evidence in their lawsuit. They threw it out, had the fact that we have no way of proving if she had even used the product correctly, yet just days after D-Day I had to be deposed for 9 hours. Their scumbag money-grubbing lawyer grilled me for hours and twisted my words and put me through a really grueling session. I sometimes wonder which was worse, going through the infidelity discovery or having to deal with lawyer. Then add in the fact that autoimmune disorders tend to get bad during times of stress. So, my wife ended up with tingling hands and a new lesion on her spine. She was put on a steroid drip for 5 days. The steroids didn't help her mood much as it made her very edgy. As if she wasn't edgy enough already. During that time period, I just remember spending a lot of hours on the back porch steps with my wife talking and smoking. Our hands always shaking. We talked about lots of things, my parents' affair, her affair, whether or not I would stay with her. Problems that led up to the affair. At least I was dropping weight in record time. I know it's not the way you should lose weight, but I lost close to 22 pounds during those 2 weeks. I eventually used the stress to kickstart a diet and keep losing weight on purpose and lost over 50 pounds in 7 months. The subject of marriage counseling kept coming up. My wife was bringing it up more so than me. For starters, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to work things out. I left my wife in a limbo of sorts for 2 weeks. I never quite made the commitment to stay or go, all the while making her do the things for proper R. It was the least I could do, lol. My hesitation on MC was also predicated by the fact that I had been dealing with therapists for over 20 years. I knew that shopping for one was a pain in the ass, insurance only covers so many sessions. And having been to countless therapy sessions with 10 different shrinks, I was aware of how they operate and felt that the service could have been done by ourselves with setting some ground rules during our talks. More on this later. My poor kids during this time were being neglected by the both of us to an extent. Well, at least, they were being fed, clothed and made sure they did homework, but we certainly didn't give them the attention they needed. Thankfully, they were at an age that they didn't require constant monitoring. The one big regret other than the kids that I have at this time period was not requiring that my wife quit her job. I became a super sleuth during those 2 weeks and was able to monitor everything from computers to phones to the house to her car. The one thing I had no access to be her work, which was even dumber when you consider that she was only going to be there for 3 more months. I did, however, get other man's schedule and would actually have my wife call me at 2 a.m. on those nights and have her talk to me during her dinner break. She now stayed in the break room instead of the cafeteria and brought her food. I lost sleep, yes, but gained peace of mind. Though I wasn't aware of it at the time, I was in full hyper-bonding mode with the wife. Even with all of the nerves, stress, depression and lack of sleep, we were sleeping together more than we ever did, even during our courtship. I would often stop her and move on to something else as a result. I've since gotten over this. I know there's a split camp on whether this was a good thing for us, but at least it was fun and pleasuring each other certainly helped the healing process in my opinion. The main caveat being was that I felt pressure to perform. It was a way of keeping her. Thus, on the occasions that I either came too soon or was too tired to do anything, I felt nervous and jittery about it. The last thing about this period was that I was conflicted about telling the other man's woman. I didn't discuss with the wife what I wanted to do but decided that since the poor woman was due to give birth in a week, it might be best to not say anything in case the shock or stress would complicate her delivery and harm the baby's health. I had no idea if OM said anything to his wife that night of D-Day and my threats. My wife claimed she didn't know either since she was purposely avoiding him and no one at work mentioned anything. She only heard about when the baby was born and he was off a few days as a result, so we figured he didn't say anything. Instead of exposure, I hoped the threat of exposure would work to keeping OM away from my wife. This would eat away at me, however, and I will get to what happened in the next part. As the 2-week period ended, I finally told my wife that I'd give the marriage a shot. I reiterated the ground rules about her affair, and transparency. And then added that we would try the following instead of marriage counsel. Spend 30 minutes a day of just us talking alone. We would talk calmly. It would be a blame-free zone. When someone expresses something, we would not argue with those feelings but rather listen and react with our own feelings. We could not get defensive and rather try to understand the other's point of view of why they are upset. We would offer constructive solutions to the problems brought forth. Most importantly, we would not hold any truth back, even if that meant it would hurt the other. I said if we couldn't pull this off, then we would give MC a shot. Her, does this mean you forgive me? Not yet, I need you to forgive yourself first. Part 7. The fight, the mulligan, plotting revenge and telling other man's wife. 2 weeks to 5 weeks post D-Day. In this time period both of our fogs started to lift. Before us lay a mountain of rocks and these rocks required lots of heavy lifting. To my wife's credit, she did a lot of it. After 2 to 3 days of trying our own little MC sessions, she started to open up about everything, and so did I. It's not an easy thing to do, to open yourself up like that after suppressing feelings for so many years. Aside from learning more details of the affair, we delved into the reasons why. I learned some details that to this day I kind of wish I didn't know, but nonetheless I felt if we were to get past it the truth needed to be known. One of the things that kept popping up in our discussions was whether or not to tell friends and family. Of course, the wife was feeling shame and regret and was truly afraid of exposure. Me, I wanted an outlet to at least 1 or 2 people to talk things over as I was more social. Up till this point, my brother was the only person outside me, my wife, another man who knew. If you recall, I told him the short story of what was happening to get out of work. As much as I love my brother, he and I are opposites in many ways. He never married or ever had a long-term girlfriend and was very private. I didn't think he was capable of providing me the emotional support I needed as much as he would have wanted to provide it. We decided that telling family and everyone would probably be a mistake, as too many people will judge. Mind you, had she not stopped the affair, I would have exposed to everyone in a heartbeat. But I did press on the issue, and we agreed that not only would I talk to a very close friend, but she would also confess to one of her sisters and talk. I'm glad I pushed for this, as her sister was able to provide perspective and actually help us in finding forgiveness without looking to sweep it under a rug like some people would look to do. My friend also was very helpful to me and helped me recognize that the affair wasn't my fault. And while yes, I could work on improving the marriage, I shouldn't take any blame for the affair itself. While we certainly were starting to make great strides to reconciliation, healing, and recovery during this period, we also had our biggest fallbacks during this time period. Looking back, I now view recovery from trauma as non-linear. In other words, imagine one of those line graphs that looks like a mountain range. The graph has lots of ups and downs, but the general trend is one that eventually reaches its peak. Recovery for me was like that. We would have some great days and then hit a bad day, but would eventually keep trudging along and things improved. We both were also feeling PTSD, and the nerves and depression were starting to affect me in my daily life. I was worried I might soon swing into a manic phase, and thus went to see my GP to have him prescribe some medication. At the doctor's appointment, I was amazed at how much weight I was losing, and we ended up having a 45-minute appointment. Guess I made the other patients wait for their sniffles. He gave me a new meds for my depression, bipolar disorder, and the anxiety. He scheduled me for STD testing and told me my wife should also come in. She was also his patient. I told my wife that I made an appointment for her to not only get some antidepressants, anxiety pills herself, but also for STD testing. We then had our first fight since D-Day. Instead of the calm manner in which we were discussing issues, she got emotional and got angry that I would even imply that STD testing was needed. It was only something minor to begin with. Another man has only been with his wife in the past 10 years. Well, forgive me if I don't trust other man, and neither should you. After a heated exchange, she grudgingly agreed to get tested, but the fight got refueled when she complained that she will forever be put in spots like this where she will be the bad guy. Me, stop the self-pity. You aren't the bad guy, but you certainly did a bad thing. It's time to atone for it. To make things worse, she had a previous engagement to attend that night with her work friends. She said other man would not be attending. They were to go to a bar in honor of a coworker who had passed 3 months prior to cancer. It was his favorite hangout, since this coworker was not in the same department as the other man and didn't hang out at dinner break. I was fairly confident that he wouldn't be there. Despite all of that, her going out so soon after D-Day really triggered me, and I got angrier at her during the fight over the STD testing and said a bunch of nasty things. Probably the first time I had let my anger come out in full force. She stormed out to go to the bar, and I stewed at home with the kids and got impatient as to when she would get back home. I called her cell in a stern tone, telling her that her time there is done and to come home. Of course, she flipped out and we had a fight that ended in her hanging up. At that point I was really questioning whether reconciliation and accepting her back was truly worth the work. She came back home in about an hour from hanging up and tried apologizing before even coming into the room. I cut her off and said, "I don't want you to answer this right away, and really think about your answer. Do you want to stay married because you truly love me, or because you're afraid of being divorced?" There was maybe a silent pause of 10 seconds. It's cliché to say that time gets longer in such moments, but it really did seem like the second hand was rusty and had to make a momentous effort to get to the next second. Her eyes filled with tears, and she replied that while she was indeed afraid of divorce and everything that comes with it, that fact, she truly loved me, was the main motivation for staying. She then went on to how she keeps hurting me and perhaps that I would be better off without her. I wasn't certain if she was looking for pity again or she truly meant that. It turns out that she said it because of what she was about to tell me. I think you should know, after I hung up on you, my friend went to the ladies' room and left her phone behind. I took it and called other man. I tried to remain calm at her confession. For starters, if I was going to get the truth from her, then yelling would likely result in her hiding things again. The reality is that the wind just got sucked out of my lungs and I was speechless. He didn't answer, but I left a message saying where we were and perhaps he could join us. And did he show up? Not in the first 20 minutes. By that point I was scared that he would and left. You realize that by trying to contact him is a deal breaker? I'm on the edge of giving up here, and as much as I appreciate the honesty, it is only giving me reason to leave you. Full-blown cry by now, I know. I just have this overwhelming urge to have some closure with him. Let me make this clear to you. If you continue to get closure with him, then you will most definitely be having closure with me as well. I kept emphasizing the word closure. At this point I had no idea what to think. The upside was that she was willing to tell me what she had done and in a weird sense was asking for help. I would have never known had she not told me. The downside was that she still deep down was drawn to the other man. It was clear that I had to reiterate that it was him or me. I just don't know what to say, and you're tipsy, so let's go to bed. You're going to have to prove to me that I'm the one who needs answers more right now. The next morning, she was up before me, and as I came downstairs, she had already typed up her letter of resignation to the hospital. This offering was probably the one thing that saved her. I told her that she would get this one mulligan. To this day I still can't believe I used that word, and any more would result in getting a lawyer. That night I knew what I had to do. It was now 5 weeks past D-Day, and I knew the task before me was going to be a hard pill to swallow. I had to contact the other man's wife. There was maybe one thing I did correctly in telling the other man's wife about her husband's affair. I didn't tell my wife I was going to do it. Perhaps I was afraid that she would try to talk me out of it, so I never gave her the chance. She expressed fear that she would come after her violently and didn't want a confrontation at all. The fear and shame were obviously still present, and facing what she had done to this woman wasn't something she would like to do. I doubt she would have warned other man, but it was possible, so I wasn't going to take any chances either. While I will always state on here that the main reason to expose an affair to the soul of the partner is for the basic reason that they have a right to know, I wanted to do as such badly for pure revenge motives. I wanted that duck to pay for what he did badly. It ate away at me knowing he likely didn't tell his wife anything and would get away with it with no consequence. As much as I didn't want to hurt his wife, I felt she needed to know what kind of man she was married to and envisioned all sorts of nasty things being thrown at him as a result. This would lead to my downfall. I was assuming too much. I first contacted her on Facebook, as you are able to send messages to people who aren't friends. I gave a detailed account of what I knew and how I knew, and this was also a mistake. I called the next day to verify that she received my message. I was dumbfounded as to her reaction. In a rage, she vociferously defended her husband and told me that my wife was crazy from her MS and using her husband as a tool to strengthen our marriage and to get me jealous. I mean, really, she believed my wife. I was so caught off guard by her reaction that I couldn't even think of the 20 things that shot holes in this excuse. My wife heard my raised voice at this point and knew what I was doing. She could glean from the conversation that other man's wife didn't believe me and did what I never thought she'd ever do. She spoke to the other man's wife. The other man's wife hung up. The next morning, I took all of the evidence, phone records, emails, Facebook messages, and mailed it by registered mail to her work with a note about the call my wife made to her husband, ending it, and how I heard for myself on speakerphone how he was sorry for making a mess of things. I wasn't the one lying in her eyes after all. I never heard from her since the phone call. At this point I felt like I did all I could do with other man's wife. I gave her the info, and what she chose to do with it was her business. I have no idea if she ever opened her eyes to the situation. At the time she was in full-blown nesting mode with the new baby and likely wanted to believe her husband so badly she chose to ignore the obvious. The good thing to come of this is that the hold other man had on my wife was gone in one fell swoop. The fresh tire tracks that say Greyhound left on her forehead had made her despise other man. I almost think she hates him more than I do at times. Also, the fact that my wife saw what was happening on the phone and refused to protect the affair went a long way in our recovery. From this point forward I can say that my wife has done everything asked and needed. Things started to get better. 5 weeks to 6 months post D-Day, after trying to expose the affair to other man's wife, we had no more drama or surprises or any signs or indications of the affair continuing. And believe me when I say that I was obsessively checking. I will have to give my wife heaps of credit for this time period. If she went out for a 10-minute excursion to the store to get milk, she would call and tell me. If she hit traffic and would be 4 minutes late, she would call. While she was out of work, she would get on IM and chat with me a good chunk of the day while I worked at the computer. It was a truly confusing time. As much as real solid improvements were being made, I had a hard time coming to terms with everything. For starters, my confidence was shot to hell. I consider myself an educated and intelligent person. I've always have been able to process and learn things quickly. Yet I had this very strange duality occurring in my own head. Emotionally, I felt I was to blame. I kept wondering, what was wrong with me? Why would my wife choose another man to lose sleep with, confide in and sleeping together? Was I that bad or unattractive? Was the other man a better lover? Do I satisfy my wife? Logically, I knew that the affair was her fault. It had little to do with me and my behavior and mostly to do with her poor choices. I knew this and understood it. It was reconciling the two sides that I had trouble with. It took an incredible amount of mental effort to cease being so passive-aggressive and walking on eggshells in fear of losing her. I think the thing that helped me the most was seeing and hearing about her fear of the same. Yet through all of her tears as she cried that she was sorry that she hurt me and wished she could undo everything, there was that part in the back of brain screaming, if you feel so bad and say that you love me, then why did you do it? Why? And then there was the paper-thin level of trust that I had for her. I must have asked the same questions at least 50 times, waiting to see if the story would change and she had intercourse as well or had plans to leave me for good. Waiting to see if the other hammer would drop. Waiting to hear that there were other affairs prior to this. Waiting to hear that she did this because she hated me or that other man was a better lover. Person, waiting for the worst. The worst never came. When you have expectations of the worst, it becomes increasingly difficult to trust despite their efforts of being completely transparent and never finding anything to contradict what they say. The best healing factor in all of this was time. And I don't mean time to forget, because it's obviously still fresh in my mind or else I couldn't recall all of this with such detail. I mean time as in, time spent with each other. We were spending more time with each than ever before. Time spent talking, putting aside our half-hour sessions. We really talked about a lot of things and as a result we really had a better way of understanding one another and our needs. Time bonding physically, it was amazing and out of this world and we would have fun 6 to 8 times a week during this period. Time doing things together that we both enjoyed, as weird as this sounds. I think stumbling across a band we never heard before really helped us bond. My wife likes prog rock, alternative music, and I like jam band, improv rock, while the other will listen to the other's music and be fine. It was not like we hated each other's music but wouldn't go out of the way to listen to it. We never had much of a commonality in music tastes. Then we came across a band that was a weird mix of prog rock, alternative, and improv. This band became our favorite band together and we have seen them in concert now 4 times. The band being a hybrid of what my wife and I liked in music became a symbol of our new marriage. Sorry for digressing so much here. Getting back to my point, what was happening was that we essentially falling in love all over again in a new light, and that damn affair probably gave us that jump start that we needed. I was really enjoying our marriage again. But like I said, it was a confusing time of polar opposites. That damn affair was still hanging over our heads, and just as I thought we were getting past it and things had improved greatly, I hit the wall around the 6-month part. 6 months to 1 year post D-Day. From a logical perspective, things were looking really good by this point. There were no signs whatsoever that the wife had continued her affair or contacted other man, and no signs other man tried to contact her. The wife got her master's and was also out of the house doing her internship during the day and getting proper sleep finally. Her being at home during the day while she was doing her final semester was a trigger for me, as her and other man met at my house during the day while I was at work. Our talks were very fruitful and communication was at its best ever in the marriage. Our physical life was also still truly amazing. I was having lots of fun with the wife and our love seemed stronger than before. Yet I was in a deep depression and dealing with obsessive behavior and an ever-growing sense of paranoia. I mean, what the duck, why was this happening to me? Why can't the right side of the brain catch up to the left side? I felt so unbalanced up there that I was probably wandering around in circles since my head tilted to one side. Okay, so this a weak attempt at a metaphor. The paranoia was overwhelming at times, and I use that term because the fear was never founded in anything and often twisted to fit my ideas of how she could work around the checkpoint system I had set up with VAR. I truly believe that I ever wished to have an affair that I probably could get away with it. I have thought of so many ways and scenarios that my wife could have used to avoid detection. From burner phones, to codes, to fake Facebook accounts, from phone cards hiding numbers. And I even thought that some spam she received in her email looked suspicious and began scouring her junk mailbox for possible communication. To give a good example of my behavior and obsessive thinking at that time, one morning I went to grab a new tube of toothpaste. We keep the unused hygiene items in the linen closet that's in our bathroom that's located right next to the shower. I noticed that the panel on the wall adjacent to the shower that opens up to allow access to the pipes was slightly ajar. I was so hypersensitive to anything that seemed out of place that I immediately thought to myself, that would be a perfect hiding spot. I wonder if my wife did have a pay-as-you-go phone, if she would hide it in there. I then grabbed the flashlight and did a 3-minute detailed search of that 2x2 area that was reachable from the closet and found nothing but an old pop can that was probably left there when the house was built. and that would actually be considered somewhat normal behavior. Each time I found nothing in any of my convoluted theories, I would then feel relief, and shortly after feeling horrible and depressed. The only time I would feel good when was I around my wife, and I held back on telling her how bad I got in my searches and paranoia. The paranoid side to me said to hold it back because if she was still cheating then you need to stay quiet. I inherently knew this wasn't good, and at first, I tried to blame my behavior on my bipolar and tried switching meds. 1 year post-data today, I couldn't pinpoint the moment that I finally started to ease off the hypervigilance. It just sort of happened. In the last year I have had moments here and there of either dwelling on the affair and wanting my time machine, or getting spooked. But the intensity is always less than before, and the frequency would stretch from days to weeks and now months apart. I would frequent the infidelity forums for periods of time and then take a break for a while and come back here and there. It felt good to help others, or try, and I still learn more about myself, my wife, and what she did through reading about others. They say we all follow a script, yet that script seems to get clearer as time goes by. Reading more on the forums as if there were lines that were mumbled and are now subtitled for clarity. While we had no real drama or anything too bad to report on, I will come out and say that we had a weird moment there. As I stated before, I am almost embarrassed to bring the following up, knowing that some of you will judge and throw the usual shaming words at me. Yet I am what I am and at what it is. If I'm going to be honest here, I will put it out there for discussion. I've only seen this topic broached once on infidelity forums so far. Of course, it met with some derision that it was even being bandied about. To preface, I never suffered too much from the mind movies that many betrayed spouses talk of. The worst moments regarding those were fleeting thoughts during physical time with my wife that I managed to wipe from my mind in order to enjoy what I was doing. I never really had them otherwise. My mind movies were more of imagining what I could have done to stop the affair or make it worse for other men and even my wife. And I can't quite pinpoint when this happened to me either. It just sort of did as well. Maybe somewhere around the 11 to 12 month mark. This led me to actually bring up the subject with my wife of something I always thought might be fun to try. So where are we today? As I explained in the beginning, the affair events are almost like watching a movie now. There isn't much of an emotional connection rehashing this as there once was one so strongly. Don't get me wrong, there are twinges still, faint echoes of doubt, and I sure do still want that time machine. But overall, the marriage is good, even great in some areas. We really enjoy each other in many, many ways. I miss her when I'm at work, and thinking about her now brings a smile on my face. The physical time tapered just slightly from insane hyper-bonding 8 times a week or more to a nice clip of 4 to 5 times a week, and even that strange fantasy of mine has faded quite a bit. We both love listening to our band together. The kids are now old enough to leave by themselves for short periods of time, so we even get out and see comedy shows and concerts and movies. We laugh a lot at the same stupid inside jokes we have, and other couple friends have remarked how great we are together recently and expressed some jealousy over it. We hold hands all the time, even if we're just watching TV together, and we're playful, like teens smacking each other's butts when one is making dinner or just walking by. While it ain't perfect, we can diffuse our disagreements quickly since we now know how to communicate in a positive manner. There's little brooding or passive-aggressive bull, and when either of us wants something, we aren't afraid to simply ask for it. Yet there is that little issue of trust. Can I trust her 100%? Nope. Will I live my life in fear that she will cheat on me again? Nope. I'm having too much fun. While I will never discount the fact that it could happen again, I have taken the plunge. I refuse to let this hang over my head any longer. We went through our trial by fire and we both came out better people. While she poured the gasoline and lit the match, she certainly grabbed as many buckets of water as she could to put it out. She now knows that she has all the strikes I'm ever going to allow her, and if she strikes again, she is gone. Will she ever cheat on me again? I have no idea, and neither does anyone ever know really. I'm in the same state as anyone married. None of us thought this could happen to us. So really the difference is that I now know that it can happen. My 99% of trust is some ways better than a blissful 100% of trust that people who haven't dealt with infidelity yet have. My comment: hope this is the love lesson we all need to learn. Even if you repair your marriage with someone, you can never trust them ever again. Smack like, sub, and bell button if you enjoyed this. And I will see you in the next one.